In the last conversation, I spoke about the role of state actors and non-state actors, the multiple new partners of the foreign ministry. Let me move that story forward and speak to 3 points again. The first is the central task of the foreign ministry. It is to manage the country's diplomatic relations, bilateral with individual countries, multilateral with large groups of countries, especially the United Nations, and the multiple themes that are discussed today, such as internet governance, environmental affairs, managing the oceans, climate change, and the list is a long one. This diplomacy management task can be segmented on the basis of the 4 pillars that we talked about earlier. The 4 pillars being political diplomacy, economic diplomacy, public diplomacy, and consular and diaspora affairs. Let's first take political diplomacy. We spoke about the role of non-state actors and the need for the foreign ministry to engage with other ministries, official agencies, the media, think tanks, scholars, science and technology experts, and all the rest. Each of these agencies works on its own particular tasks. But the foreign ministry puts all that within a larger political framework. That's a challenging task because the foreign ministry does this through its network of embassies and through its headquarters organization, namely the ministry itself. Then we come to economic diplomacy, the second pillar. The economic diplomacy pillar is one where the foreign ministry has to work with the economic ministries. It would be the Ministry of Commerce or Foreign Trade, the Ministry of Industry, the Ministry of Finance, and multiple agencies that work on economic issues. In all these, the foreign ministry is a contributor, but not the lead player. So that is a classic task of harmonizing or coordinating actions among different agencies, as also non-state partners like the chambers of commerce, the chambers of industry, the organizations of business, and a range of others. The third pillar is public diplomacy. Now, public diplomacy means working with the country's Ministry of Information and Broadcasting, with the Ministry of Tourism, because tourism is a major contributor not only to economic activity but also to the image of the country. And this again is one of those multiple, many-pronged areas of action. Public diplomacy also includes managing the country's image. Again, not primarily handled by the foreign ministry, but in which the foreign ministry makes an input. The image consists of the heritage of the country, what people feel about the country, other people. And mind you, the image that a country wants to project has to match the country's own self-image. So public diplomacy is also connected with domestic engagement and dialogue with domestic publics. And the fourth pillar, equally important, is consular work and diaspora work. Consular work has grown in importance because people travel more. People have connections abroad. India, for example, has something like 40 million Indians living abroad. Some are the descendants of people who migrated a century and more ago to places like Mauritius, the Caribbean, Fiji, and other places. South Africa, Kenya, East Africa included. Then there are the new migrants. India has some 7 or 8 million people working in the Gulf, in Saudi Arabia and in the Gulf Sheikhdoms. India has 3 million, nearly 4 million Indians or people of Indian descent who live in the US. Some 2.5 million in Canada, another 1.5 million, 2 million in the UK, etc. It's a long list. So, more and more the diaspora feels connected with the home country. And in fact, diaspora diplomacy is a new area of diplomatic action. We didn't talk about some of the other functional agencies, actors that also work within the Foreign Ministry. This includes the Legal and Treaties Division. For example, agreements, accords, protocols are signed by many different ministries. And sometimes it's very difficult for a country to keep track of all the agreements signed with another country or with a range of countries. So every official agreement has to be lodged at the countries, at the Foreign Ministry's Legal and Treaties Division. Then there is a historical division. There is a policy planning unit, extremely important. There are other agencies that include those that handle communications, that handle the Foreign Ministry's intranet, if it has one. Sadly, there are a few foreign ministries, including India's, that right now do not have a full intranet, but most countries have a full intranet. The second major area of action for a foreign ministry is managing its human resources. At the end of the day, the only asset, the only real asset of a foreign ministry are its people. Of course, foreign ministries own buildings in foreign countries, buildings that they may have bought 50, 80 years ago, sometimes inherited from a previous regime or a previous government or a previous time altogether. And you'd be surprised how important it is to ensure that these official properties located abroad are managed well. That's a particular area of discussion which I will put aside for now. Human resources, coming back to human resources. This means how to assess the performance of its people, how to promote them, how to help them gain expertise in different areas. For example, the United States selects about a dozen diplomats who are paid to go and study for a master's degree in a major university. Excellent method. The Chinese every year send 140 of their best selected diplomats on a year's training program in a major university. It could be Sorbonne, it could be Oxford, or it could be Harvard, or Yale, or Stanford for that matter. That again is a very effective way of ensuring that your people gain in expertise. So what does a foreign ministry want of its people? It wants diplomats who are at the same time specialized in 2, 3, 4 disciplines and have a generalist's ability to link different subjects together and to manage the larger picture, particularly as they rise up the ladder. Now that's not easy. And this incidentally is a reply to the old question, should diplomats be specialists or generalists? In fact, they should be specialized generalists. Another major responsibility that the Foreign Ministry has is to promote its people. It has to find the right kind of person, individual, who should be promoted. In the majority of foreign ministries around the world, people are promoted on the basis of competence, of performance. That is, merit-based promotions. Take Singapore. Singapore is a small country, but a model in many respects. In their foreign ministry and in other ministries, they apply a method that they borrowed from the Shell petroleum company. Very interesting. What they do is, after a person has worked in the foreign ministry for 5 or 7 years, internally, a small group of people produce a profile for that person based on his annual reports as well as his reputation as built up over time. They then project forward that person's career path. That is, they try to anticipate where that individual will be 5, 10, and 15 years from today. So it amounts to kind of predicting the career path of its officials and then managing their career in such a way as to fulfill that career path. It sounds manipulative, but it isn't actually. It is a method that they have used to great effect over a number of years. And I'll come back to the Singapore example a little bit later on. Another major task in a foreign ministry is grievance redressal. Problems come up, how to handle them. Now let me give you a German example. Every embassy located abroad is a microcosm of the national system of that country located in Mongolia or in Côte d'Ivoire or in Bolivia. So how do you run that? Not easy. Problems come up, management problems come up. So the Germans came up with a method. Every year, every single home-based official, from the deputy head of mission right up to the security guard, sends an anonymous, electronically filed report on his experience and his impression of the people with whom he works or she works, including the ambassador. Now this report goes to a special unit. That special unit processes all these reports and produces a generalized statement which blends together all the numerical gradings as well as the explicit specific comments, and those are then sent back to the ambassador. The ambassador is required to call a meeting of all his home-based staff and read out the report. The goal is not to humiliate anyone, but it is to ensure accountability. And mind you, in Berlin, at the German Foreign Office, there are trained psychologists who also scan all this material to identify places where human management problems appear to exist. And then they intervene proactively, they visit the place, they meet with the ambassador, they meet all the officials, and they try and resolve the issue. This is a brilliant way of ensuring that you deal with problems before they become a disaster. Okay. One other point relating to human resource management I did not touch on is training. The training function is crucial. In every entity in the world today, how to train your staff, how to train your people is a major, major challenge. When I joined the diplomatic service, we received the training, and that was way back in 1960. We received training for a few months at entry, and then we were trained. I never had the opportunity to attend a further training program. Now in India, for example, when Manmohan Singh was Prime Minister, he introduced a fine method in 2008 under which every single official, when he is at the threshold of a major promotion, and there are 3 key levels of promotion in the civil service, typically after, say, 14 years of service, after 20 years of service, and after 27, 28, 30 years of service. At each of these levels, every official must attend a minimum of 3 to 4 weeks of training. Now, the same method is used everywhere. Many countries organize training programs for ambassadors. Even those who have already been ambassadors, before they go out, have to attend another training program. Not so much by way of training as a seminar kind of discussion on how to deal with a range of issues: professional, man management, and managing the system. In my third and last point, I will speak of knowledge management. And this is a short point. For any institution today, managing knowledge is a major task. In the Foreign Ministry, this means, number one, capturing experience, capturing past knowledge, capturing the experience of ambassadors who have completed their assignment and are about to leave to go somewhere else. That ambassador, she or he, must write a report which narrates their experience. That's called, in India, we call it a handing over note. In some other country, it may be called a post report. The Iranians do this in a very interesting way. Every Iranian ambassador, when he completes assignment, has to go back to the Foreign Ministry, is given a computer and a desk place to work, where that ambassador spends 6 weeks writing a report that runs to a minimum of 50 or 70 pages, summarizing experience of that particular job, that particular post, and making recommendations for the future. Whichever method you use, the main thing is to capture the accumulated knowledge of 3 or 4 years at a post. There are other attributes to knowledge management. One of them is called what the US State Department calls Diplopedia. The Diplopedia is within a website where people put together a narrative on, say, how to organize a film festival, or what are the best ways of reaching out to your diaspora in a crisis situation. There are many, many activities that can be addressed in this fashion. But the beauty of the Diplopedia method is that anyone within the system can contribute to it. So it becomes a way of crowdsourcing knowledge. There are other aspects of knowledge management which one can go into. But I think I've said enough. Thank you very much.